We were acknowledged for trick or treat. We had one tree cutting contract at that time. Construction mitigation update, CARES Act update. We approved the airport rules and regulations. We increased tree trimming 5K. We allocated 5K to the mowing group to proceed with their updates for equipment. We took the holiday break and we accepted the CIP project list such as it is for anything there. Any comments or changes in the minutes? I have it on Word so I can change them if you want.
I have no comments.
Yeah, they look fine to me. So I would motion and second that we approve the minutes.
Second.
Aye.
Okay, so
Is there unanimous consensus to approve the minutes?
sounds like it.
Yes.
I'm aye for
Yes.
it.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. All right. Okay, so we're to the committee reports. Finance report. Do you want to present these, Knut?
Yes, so
I can bring them. I have some of them if you want to tell me what you want, or I can just let you do.
it might be easier if you let me share. I have them already in Adobe, so I can just walk through them.
Okay, you should let me get out, and you should be able to share just at will.
You just need to give me permission now.
Yeah, I think I did.
Oh, maybe. Hang on a second. Here we go. All right. So let's start with the assessment district. Can you all see this now?
Yes.
So this is end of 2020, December 31st. We have $20,000 in redemption account. The next payment coming up is going to be in March of about $15,000, so we have that covered. Total reserves are now about close to $92,000. So we have earned a bit on the CDs, and I think we're required to have about 90,000 in reserve. So we're actually a little bit ahead there, which is good. There's not been any major changes to income. We pay our usual fee for NBS to manage it, and then the district gets the annual income of about $1,600, $1,700 for managing the assessment district. So those are, I don't know if there's any question. I can show you the debt schedule. The next payment coming up here will be March 2nd, 21, which, as I said, well, it's $14,025. That's interest only. The next big payment is in September, which is principal and interest of total of $87,000 for this year. Kevin just received the annual report from the management company. And here you can see how the payments for, this is the report for last year. And you can see the expenses, the interest, and the principal for last year. And I think what's worth pointing out is the comment here in the funds that CPAD has completed all improvements within the districts, meaning we've managed to bring the reserves up to where they were required to be, and we've managed to call the bonds for people that have paid off their assessment. So it's all up to date as of the end of 2020.
Very good. Yeah.
So if there's no question on the assessment district, let's move on to the airport or CPAD. So this is the current financial. At the end of last year, we had about 63,000 in the general checking. The treasurer at El Dorado County was sitting on 75,000 from the property taxes due in December, and most of that is going to go into the assessment district to pay off the payment in September, I believe. Some of that, of course, is part of the special tax, and some of that is the property tax for road payments. We have our 9,000 in reserved airport maintenance and 21,000 for street maintenance. And looking at the fuel, we have 65,000 sitting in the accounts receivable. We just purchased fuel here in early January, so that has come down probably about $30,000. So that's what the balance looks like right now. I don't know if there's any questions to that.
What's the undeposited funds?
Undeposited funds, 75. Good question.
I mean, it's a small, relatively small amount, but
To be honest, I'm not sure. I can go into the check details and see if there's any explanation of it right there. I didn't really dig into it because I assume it may mean that the bookkeeper has received a check that she hasn't deposited in the bank yet that was due in that period, because she does the deposits for us.
I see.
And the reason the accounts receivable is negative is that some people pay their hangar rent ahead of time.
Yeah, that sounds like 1 month's tie down fee that probably didn't get deposited.
Wow.
Exactly. Okay. So looking at the P&L statement, on the income side, except for the 10,000 Caltrans grant, which is in jeopardy, I guess. We don't know whether we are going to get it yet. The rest of it looks like it's all within the expected range for the budget so far. But the 10,000 is kind of, that's the annual obstruction grant that we have been getting from Caltrans. But I guess at this point, we don't know whether they're going to do it for this year.
We were warned by Caltrans some months ago that this was in jeopardy. They thought it was going to come through for this year, but would be very late. It's getting late enough, it may not even happen this year, and it certainly was in high jeopardy next year. So this is an avenue we're going to need to explore to see if there's anything we can do about it. This wasn't specific to us. This is kind of a general output that they use for assistance with primarily obstruction mitigation all over the place. And apparently the Caltrans/state budget got rid of this. So it's potentially a 10K hit that we're gonna have to deal with.
Yes. Looking at expenses and against the budget, I want to point out that the budget that's used here is the budget that was approved back in August. We have since revised and approved a modified budget that added more funds to the clearing and tree services and the mowing and spray operation. So that's why you will see a difference in those areas for the next time. So clearing and tree service, I think we are up to close to 15,000 so far this year. So you will see either 10 or 15. I think it's 15 we have budgeted for in the new budget. And then for mower and spray operation, there was added 5,000 for the purchase of mowing equipment and tractor and that operation. And some of the other ones were reduced correspondingly. But looking at the budget, I think except for those, it all looks to be pretty well within. So at this point, we are 13,000 below budget. But as you can see, one of the reasons that helped was fuel has been cheaper so far, and Kevin has done a good job of getting fuel at the low points. And then the inventory change is always a big, depending on what's in the tanks and what rolls over from one period to the next, it goes into the inventory change there. But as of this point, I'll say we are sticking to the budget for this year. And as we'll talk about later, this is without any CARES grant included in the budget, but maybe we'll talk about that later. But that's what I had for the financial reports. I don't know if there's any questions.
No questions. Looks good.
All right, so I'm done, Bill. So you can.
All right.
That moves to me. Kevin here.
So, Mr. Cooksey, do you want to present, report, or just summarize? It's up to you.
Yeah, I just a couple of highlights as usual, rather than reading it to the participants. Just a heads up to Dave Becker, I'm trying to pull together a new template for our lease agreements, and goal is to kind of have that done in the first week or two of February, and I'll hand that over to you for a red line, and we can maybe discuss that a little bit. Fuel system, just to springboard off of what Knut had just said, if you do get a chance to download the report from the website, it has the usual, just kind of the trend line of the fuel pricing, and the line shows us we're just about back up to what is kind of my reference, my high water mark for tracking prices back on the 1st of January in 2019. So the price off the truck is kind of recovered from the COVID lows that we're down about 40%. So we're kind of right back up to where we were 2 years ago. I guess that's a good thing that it's not much higher, because during 2019 it certainly took us up into the $5 at the pump range. So clicking up it is. So if you haven't been out and bought any gas, we're at about $4.30 a gallon right now. If you are one of the folks that has one of those auto generated tables that shows you fuel prices in the area, we're a little bit high, and I think that's relative to the other airports in the cohort, that is. But the reason for that, I think, is many of them had yet to purchase fuel, and when that happens, of course, their prices will change accordingly. We buy every 10 to 12 weeks, so other airports that I use as comparators are kind of in that same cycle. Currently, we're doing quite well despite everything. Last year, we did finish up with about a 20% increase over fuel purchases in 2019. So COVID was good for fuel sales, I guess. People were out flying. And even this January, straight line extrapolation, we might beat last year, but I think that also going to depend on how the weather is this week as we race towards the finish line. So gas doing well. The system's holding up, knock on wood. The office, so some of you heard of kind of a pet project that doesn't cost anything. I keep looking for a way to begin digitizing all of the paper that's over here. We have just so many documents that are starting to get moldy and mushy, and there's some really important ones that I've discovered in there. And I finally found a couple of competing software tools that do what's called tagging. So if you've seen like the family photo archive, where you can put Granny and Uncle Billy and Uncle Spike's name in there and start tagging documents with search fields, that's what this does. So you can take a document and mark it as legal, contract, tie down, whatever it might be. And the same thing with regulatory or other important documents, and then be able to search on those and generate a hit list for whatever it is you might be looking for. What I am finding is, as I go through these boxes, that at one time or another, we've had folks here that really had a good handle on operating the airport, and we've just lost that sort of knowledge, that legacy knowledge that often happens with turnover and as people ride off into the sunset. So I'm looking for a way to do that economically, and these two tools will be candidates for that. So I'll look forward to sharing more of that in the future. On the fun front, I got an email just today. For those of you who happen to have the report printed, page 3, I'm down at number 6. It's recovering the tie down use here in front of the hangar building. I went ahead back in November or whatever it was, did some elevations with Dave Becker's help and put together just a quick 7460, sent that in. And I got back today, kind of an informal, yeah, it's okay with us. And now we're going to have a little conversation about how we formalize that to a level where Caltrans won't come back and bite us. So I'm kind of hoping that we'll have 4 additional tie downs back in rotation here, because we certainly could use them. Immediately below that, on that same page, is a recent discovery of these of HAZ lights. They're these small, modest-sized LED red HAZ lights that could be bolted just about anywhere, and they have FAA certification. So, Terry, if you get a chance to look at that, appreciate kind of partnering with you to give that some thought as opportunity to stick some of these lights in some of those places that Chris Brooks was a little edgy about when he was here before, thinking there should be a light here and maybe one there. This seems like a pretty simple and cost-effective way to do that.
Yeah, I just saw that about an hour before the meeting. I look forward to seeing the pricing on that. And
They're
they're
about $400 for the non-smart version, and if you want to be able to walk around with your cell phone and check the battery health, that it's about $600 a pop. So, either way, to keep an old fart like me from having to go up a ladder, I'll throw in the $200 for the extra one. But let's see.
Yeah, I'll work with you on that.
That'd be great. Last one that's worth mentioning here, I think, well, 2 things that are related. I do have RFPs or RFQs out to 3 additional CPA firms that are savvy in auditing district books. And the first of the 3 just came back in late this afternoon with a bit of a price advantage to that outfit. So that's another one where I'm hoping to be able to table those out and have them for you to share with the team by the next meeting. And the footnote to that is Anna, the bookkeeper, had said, it's a really interesting experience to change up your auditor after a while, just in going back to somebody you have to educate on how you do things and where you find things. I've been through it enough with both private and public companies that I think we can handle it. Our systems here are pretty minimalistic, so I think we would survive. So look forward to that soon. And then finally, I appreciate, what do we have? Jim Eddickson, Phil Elby, Larry, and Mike Bell on the line here, the 4 people representing the district who aren't on staff or on the board. So any of these financial reports, including this recently received NBS annual report regarding the street bond, can now be accessed on the website. So I've created a finance tab within the governance menu, and you'll find a whole bunch of stuff there in kind of the expected financial reports that we do each month will start to show up there, and anybody and everybody can find them. Other than that, I think that's it. I'll yield there just for the sake of time.
Okay. I'll jump right ahead though. So as far as I know, there's no major procurements outstanding, and I believe all of the contracts let for tree trimming have been finished and paid off, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So we really don't have any open significant procurements or contracts at the moment, and the other ones are all completed as budgeted. So there's really not much to talk about there.
Yeah, there's residual left, so hopefully we won't need to tap into those too much. The only place we're accumulating a kind of off contract is our ongoing relationship with the CAL FIRE guys.
Correct, and that's nominal. So I think that's in the noise. It's
Yep.
All right, volunteers, the estimate for December, January is about more than 260 hours of volunteer effort. A lot of that is kudos to the trimming and mowing team and the extra effort, particularly by Dave, for getting the scraping done in a lot of the south area towards Oxford. So we're trying to make the ongoing issues down there and being able to mow it with regular equipment so we don't have to hand mow all that crap up there. It also makes fire happy to see us actively doing stuff. So very much appreciated. Looks really good. We'll keep picking away at it as it's available. Also special kudos to people like Jeff Thornhill and stuff, who has been heavily engaged in chopping down and assisting neighbors in clearing areas that were necessary for obstruction mitigation. So, you know, if you see him, thank him, because he's a big reason we're making the progress we're making without spending money. Okay, public forum, public comment. Here we go. Anybody have anything to say? Bring things up, let us know.
Burl, this is Phil. Have we heard anything from the vendor on that fuel tank yet? I haven't heard anything and I haven't called him.
No, and I think we owe him a drawing, and I have that done. We're trying to get an early read from county. We had a conversation with them today, and they have to go think about it. I want to be very careful with him, because my understanding of procurement requirements, and I need to check it, but my experience with procurement requirements, if we hire him to do some of the preliminary budgeting and stuff, we may exclude him from being able to do the work. Because it's considered. So I need to be really careful, but no, I have not engaged him. He indicated he was really busy, and then we owed him some detail stuff. So I'm going to try to keep it on a casual basis and I want to preserve him for being able to actually bid on the actual work when the time comes. So I'm trying to ease into that without triggering too much mumbo jumbo. What happens is, if you'll have to put this thing out to a general audience for bid because of the dollar value. And then other vendors will bid to the specs and drawings, and there'll probably be a minimal site visit, which is kind of what happens. If they find out he had been having conversations with us and actually produced things that we paid him for, they can contest his bid, and he might have a very competitive bid. So we just assume they don't get in. We don't give them that opportunity to do that. So I've got to figure out how we can proceed and then keep him in the loop as far as input. That's the only concern I have. Otherwise, we're gathering the details, and Knut and I have taken up the task of put together our requirements, so we actually write them down, and we'll bring that up for board discussion next meeting to decide, to kind of present what it is we're trying to do, what the output's going to be. And I think that's didn't get done to enough detail and things like AWAS. So when it finally got done, people said, well, it doesn't do this or it does that, or and we want to avoid that with the fuel system. But we're chugging along, and if I hear from him, I'll let you know, or vice versa.
Sure.
But I mentioned that to him there too, so it's not like we're shunning him. We're just trying to be careful. And I will probably reach out to AOPA to talk about that 10K grant. I think that's something might be right up their alley to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, that would be a good thing. I also have talked with AOPA at some length on, there are grants available to acquire property adjacent to airports.
Yeah, there is. There's a lot of stuff. So we'll just keep that dialogue going. And I forwarded to Melissa a bunch of stuff related to our financial situation. If they want to read it, they got it. So
yeah.
All right. Anything else from anybody? Okay. Thank you, Phil.
Sure.
So we're into old business, obstruction mitigation. Basically, we satisfied the latest requirements and had an inspection January 21st, which was 4 days ago. The good news is it appeared to be more favorable than anyone prior to. He actually asked us to verify the runway lights work, so we turned them on for him. So I think we're very, very close, which would be a significant update from what we've been trying to do. He's aware and we're aware that we don't stop. We're still going to have to go in the 10 to 15K range because we already have a list of trees we want to cut next. So we'll be notifying people shortly. But the vibes I get from the interaction is, unless something that we're surprised by happens, we should get a go ahead. The other thing that's happened that I'm aware of is that the management at Caltrans Aero has changed. They have a new operating manager up there, very much more airport favorably oriented than the prior one. So we suspect that will also potentially be in our favor for these gray zones, because if you literally look at where we're at, we've cut nearly 200 trees, or head cut, but we do not have 100% Part 77 compliance, but they're getting to where, you know, we've mowed the grass down pretty close. It's not quite a putting green, but we're headed that direction, and I think that's been acknowledged. So I think that's very positive effort. And again, like I said before, a huge amount of this goes on the shoulders of Kevin, the manager, and the 3 or 4 or 5 very dedicated volunteers that are out there cutting trees and hauling brush and burning stuff on an almost continuous basis to try to catch up with the situation. So I think it's looking very positive. We won't know for, typically takes 2-3 weeks before we get the written letter back. So we'll see. The other good news is CARES Act. We've been talking about that. We finally have the funds in the bank. Kevin, again, led the charge on irritating but not pissing off all of the people involved in that. We actually went ADSO San Francisco, regional Denver, Washington FAA, then our representative McClintock's staff member in Washington got involved, and they finally figured out that we're no longer owned by the county. And courtesy of Kevin working with the manager at Tracy, who knows how to work this thing, we basically had a rubber stamp set up for sending the bill in. So that is all done online electronically. That went in. I got contacted by FAA person in Seattle. You can see how convoluted this thing is to try to get a dime out of the FAA, but the person in Seattle indicated they needed a couple more forms. Those were done the same day, we sent back. Funding was approved the following day, and we have it in the bank.
Yeah.
So that's
Excellent.
how it works. It took 9 months.
Well, that's
And
great news.
the thing we need to continue to follow up on is our data, and the FAA data still has problems, and we need to try to make an active effort to try to clear these up so we're not stuck down the road. You know, we're apparently close enough to get funded, so it may be okay, but there are things that are wrong in the databases that we're aware of that we'll have to figure out and continue to be aware of. So good news on both of those, I think, as far as old business.
That's great. Big
Well,
thanks.
just to point out, our SAM registration is up for renewal in April, so we need to make sure we get that done and updated before then.
Correct. SAM is their system for knowing, what's that mean? Do you remember SAM? I don't know, but that's where they understand who we are and which accounts and all that other Dun and Bradstreet ratings and all this crap. And so that's an opportunity to maybe correct some of the data when we renew that thing.
Yeah, as far as I need, we need to update then, and then the DUNS registration, which is registered as a manager and not as a district.
Yeah, it's got some title and it's just Shingle Springs as an address. It's supposed to use the physical address. So those are the kind of things that are still screwed up, in my opinion. Okay, new business. Currently, it's not specified in the policy per se. It's left up to the treasurer to kind of determine this. Our system is such that the bank accounts, there's numerous ones. There's the assessment district accounts, there's checking account, the CDs and various things. But basically, we require authorizing signatures when we write checks. So below $1,000 is one signature, usually the manager, just to pay routine bills. If it goes above 1,000, it takes two signatures. And then if it gets, I think, 25,000, it requires board approval on top of the two signatures. So what we've been carrying is all 5 board members have been in the signature stream. And what that does is you got to go physically get all 5 signatures to do anything different with the accounts. For example, we're trying to remove Joe. So we need to find Joe and get him to sign, plus the 4 other board members to sign before we can delete Joe. So the proposal is to trim that back to 3 signatures plus the manager, just to make it easier to change things around. And I don't personally see it loses any effect unless you guys want to remain a signatory, although I don't think we've used other than 2 or 3 people anyway this year. So the proposal is to clarify the authorized signatures to be the president, treasurer, secretary, and manager. And Canute can answer questions or something, but we've
Actually,
created.
Bill, we only had 4 of the board members had signature.
Oh, we only had 4. Okay, but yeah. So it wasn't really stipulated how that was. We just kind of took what was and ran with it. So I think we can cut it back to 3 in the manager and not lose any effectiveness or control in that sense, unless there's a concern of doing something different.
Just a question that I think it's just by reducing the number of signatures is just administratively just make things a little simpler, and given the history that it's just it's just a very few people have had to sign anyways. Is that correct?
Correct. And we feel that these people are, at least one of these people is usually available for the second signature as needed. Because again, we're trying to pay bills to get, we don't wait 30 days and go to the next meeting to pay bills like was done before. We pay them when they come in. So basically, as people are available, we can get the second signature as needed. And we think that's enough coverage, but it's open to discussion.
And it's somewhat unrelated. Do you think we eventually would turn this into a policy?
Yeah, well, the policy's kind of blank on this, so we will incorporate this in the policy. But the immediate need is to make some changes documented in the minutes so that we can drop fuller and clean things up short term, and then we will make the financial policy and probably bring it forward at the next meeting.
So Terry, maybe even though we listed the positions, president, treasurer, secretary, if that gets approved, I would like to see the minutes specifically name the ones that come off the account and the ones that go on, because the bank requests that in approved minutes.
Okay, got it.
All right.
So I guess the proposal is that Fuller is, I already got his signatures, but he's coming off the accounts. And
yeah,
then as we talked about here, Burl, myself, and you, Terry, and then Kevin would be the new people authorized to sign the checks unless there's any objections to that.
Hearing,
so I would second that motion if no discussion.
okay. So, let's see, Kenneth, you motioned to do this, bro? You second?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I vote aye.
Okay.
Jeff's aye.
And I'm aye. And Glenn lost audio. I don't know if he's back or not.
I'm back. I vote aye.
Okay, thank you, Glenn.
And Terry, yeah, please just make sure
and
you
the
list
minute-
the names explicitly.
Okay, we'll do.
All right. Now, the next one, this came up from, well, I can mention name, Dave McClellan is concerned about the deterioration of the gutter in the front of his house and the potential trip hazard because it's depressed an inch or so from the adjacent driveway edge, I guess. He went ahead and got an estimate through his subcontractor to do actually the deluxe job. Basically, they would remove the gutter along his street face. They would excavate down, recompact, build it back up, put a new gutter in, and then about 18 inches of pavement along there would all be redone. That's 10K.
It's just for in front of his house?
That's for just in front of his house. If you do simple math of 120 properties times 10K, it's $1.2 million. But this is something we've not done that we need to do. And what I want to do is propose somebody take on the assignment of doing a setup. What we need to do is decide what constitutes a hazard, some range of deterioration, and include street surfaces and gutters in this thing. Right now, we don't have anything. Basically, it was always hand waved and somebody said, well, I'll fix it or not fix it. And I think we need to rationalize that and write it down for part of our guidelines, because a lot of jurisdictions, for example, you have a sidewalk and a gutter. The sidewalk ends up being the property owner's responsibility. And they define things like OSHA says if it's a 3/4 inch or less offset, then it's considered not a hazard. We don't have any of that stuff, and I think we need to get it. If we chose to fix a gutter in that sense, that's half of our current street budget, and leaves nothing for anything else. And I believe the gutters throughout the district are not in very good condition for a lot of reasons. I don't know if his are the worst, if there's something else that's worse that we need to be aware of. So I think we need to, I'm proposing consideration of somebody volunteering to do, we need to do an overall survey. We need to look at streets also and kind of keep up with the conditions of both the gutters and the streets. We need to make some determinations on what constitutes a hazard or not and go from there. I appreciate the way he chose, the way they went about fixing it would be a very long-term permanent fix. But given that we have no income and no money for streets, I think we would have to look at some mitigating thing that's even, temporary resurfacing or, thin set on top of the existing that won't last, but it'll last long enough to abate the hazard. But I think we need to get all that up in the open, defined and written down. So this is the discussion about that amongst the board to see how we should proceed on this. I don't want to just tell him no, because I think he has a legitimate concern, but we need to define the district's position as far as what is hazardous, what is not, and move forward from there. And also have an assessment of conditions out there. I mean, do we have worse places that need to be somehow prioritized, and then we can go from there. So that's what I wanted to kick around and see what the board thinks we ought to be doing about that.
I fully agree, because we need to carefully take the big picture assessment of this. Otherwise, we could be required to spend a lot of money we simply don't have. Just to be clear, Burl, I think when you say volunteers, that's volunteers in the public, not just the board. Is that correct?
Yeah, anybody that the board feels is competent to do this can do it. It doesn't have to be a board member. I don't know as Dave McClellan would do it, because he's been asked before, but he's pretty busy. I don't think he's even doing a lot of work in this area anymore. But basically, we need to put together a street management and assessment sort of thing, and we need to define some of these requirements and maybe some potential lower cost temporary fixes that are reasonable, and then we can have a path forward, because he only happens to be the one that has the connections to do it and his concern. But my guess is there's a lot more areas of failure. The one in front of my house, is broken into little chunks and it's sloped wrong, meaning we get a lot of water that we shouldn't. And I think that's pretty endemic throughout the whole district. So it was not addressed in the last major street redo because they kind of said, oh, too much for us to deal with, was the impression I got. Well, I think we're gonna have to deal with it. So we might as well come up with a rational approach to it. That's what I'm suggesting.
Earl, this is Phil. Has anybody taken and gotten a visual on the hazard itself or how extensive this is at this one particular spot?
Yeah, I have. He sent pictures and stuff, and basically he's got about an inch lip at the edge of driveway. I'm not even sure that constitutes a hazard because it's not a walking surface, but that's what we need to determine with some legal input and stuff to see if we have any reason to believe that's a hazard or not. His concern is it's a potential trip hazard. So somebody walking from the street up his driveway could catch a toe and fall, and that's a legitimate concern, but we don't have the boundaries defined from our perspective, which we need to do.
So Burl,
Hey.
it hasn't been determined that the CPAD has jurisdiction over the gutters versus the paved area, and where's the demarcation line?
Well, everything I've managed to squirrel by is that the CPAD district owns the gutters. So we basically are stuck with having to fix them.
Okay.
That could be double checked as part of this equation too. A lot of them have been patched, fixed, and modified by property owners over the years. But I believe the way it works in my limited amount of time to look at this is if you have a sidewalk to a curb to a gutter, the sidewalk sometimes is the property owner's problem, even though the city put it in. But the curb gutter seems to be 100% the city or district's problem. So I'm assuming these are our problem as a district.
Earl, one of the ways that sometimes this is addressed is instead of trying to hog out all the concrete and replace it, they do an asphalt patch. So you,
Asphalt patch or an epoxy cement patch, there's a lot of things. Yeah, and I think we need to evaluate what we would support as a district. Then if the property owner wants to dig it up and do it, we're happy to let them. You know, that's kind of the thinking I'm thinking, but we don't have anything in writing. We don't have any real procedure on it, and we have not done what I would consider a due diligence inspection of the district to know, is he the worst, or is he, is there something that's really going to bite us that's out there? We don't know. So,
well, I
This is
believe
David.
current code requires that for a permit to get a driveway, the first 4 feet of the driveway has to be asphalt. And so when I built those townhouses, the first 4 feet of the driveways, those were required to be asphalt for different issues here in the county. So I don't think
Yeah, so-
anybody did that.
yeah, I know.
So
We should look into that. There is an implied easement of, I think, 4 or 5 feet from the street for permits
Yes.
to put in driveways and stuff. And that could be clarified in this too. I think this is just an area that's been ignored, but I think we should pick it up and run with it, put something together for board review, and then move forward as a district as here's how we're going to approach it.
Yeah.
And I think if it's determined that there is a safety issue, we're going to have to fix it to some level to abate the safety issue, but we don't necessarily have to do the long-term fix because we just don't have any money to do that anyway. So I think
And it may be addressed by grinding. Just get out there, and I have a concrete guy that is pretty reasonable. So if you decide that you want to have someone look at it, I have someone.
Yeah, I was
Okay.
thinking that too. If he had some kind of if the asphalt being high is the issue, we could get somebody with an asphalt grinder or something that just.
yeah, I think
Kind of
the
taper that
problem. Yeah, we need to define what we're going to do as a district and how we're going to abate these kind of things. I think the problem is the Newport driveway is high to the gutter at this point. So it's actually his driveway that's high.
that would be his problem. Especially if it's a new driveway.
Well, it's new it's been, yeah, I don't know the story. But those are the sort of things that we have nothing to go back on, and I think we need to generate our guidelines or policy as a district as to how we're gonna deal with this, so.
The concrete here are hydraulics due to the clay soil. And so the concrete moves around. And so to get a perfect marriage of the street, gutter, and someone's new driveway and have it stay that way is almost impossible. That's why the county requires asphalt.
So anyway, so that's where that one is. So I think the minutes should reflect that we were asking for someone to head up this program for that development, and we'll go from there.
I will note in the minutes.
All right. And then this other one is informational. The auditor that we recently had done picked up the fact that our compensation for the manager does not meet state guidelines for exempt position. You're required to pay twice minimum wage in order to declare a position exempt. So we don't. So we're having to revert the manager to an hourly position, which means time cards, payment of overtime, payment for additional hours. And if he covers the amount of hours he's currently covering, we can anticipate the salary cost to increase over what it currently is. Or we tell him no, and stuff won't get done, such as oversight of mitigation obstruction activities by contractors. So puts us in a little bind. So we're going to have to monitor the situation and anticipate that we may have less and less manager time in the office in order to try to keep control of the budget.
Bro, how far out dollar wise are we from making the?
We're right now about 3K annually too low. So it's close.
That's close.
So consideration could be when we talk about budget and money next meeting is bump it up, make it exempt again, you know, until the minimum wage goes up, and then we have to chase it.
I know, I think we all know Kevin puts a tremendous amount of time in beyond what's expected. And I believe the laws are, we have to pay him for all the time put in as an hourly employee. And that's something we can't afford.
Yeah, my experience comparing when I was working, I was exempt, and the lead man in the shop passed my salary at about 7 months in, and he ended up about double my salary because he was there at the same time I was there, but he was on hourly. So
I've had that similar experience. Yes.
Yeah. So it's just an FYI. It's another one of those situations where I think we need to be aware of the background to it, and then I'm proposing, because of some of the other things we're going to do later in the meeting, we'll have a pretty serious next year budget prep meeting next board meeting, and this could be one of the items to consider.
Yeah, I believe you.
What's the current minimum wage here in California? $12 an hour?
I'd have to go look it up again, but
I believe El Dorado County is at 13.
Mhm.
For
So
small.
$26 an hour would be appropriate then to,
that would be the minimum to make this back to an exempt position.
And that's based on 40 hours a week.
Yeah, and I think it's very clearly an exempt position, the way it operates.
Yeah.
But we cannot call it that unless we have a compensatory salary that goes with it. So,
So you're going to talk about that later on, is what the budget.
well, we're going to talk about a lot of funding things that don't have dollars to them yet, and I was going to propose try to start fleshing the details out by the next board meeting, so we have something to really chew on, and this could be one of the items to consider.
yeah, if it's $12 an hour, which I think it kind of is right now, one way or another, within a few pennies, that would be $54,080 a year.
Yep, that's about right. And right now, round numbers, we pay 50. So. So there's no decision made. This is for information and to get the juices flowing, so. And we've just as of January 1 started time cards, so we're in the process of doing that right now, so. CARES funds, as I mentioned earlier, we received the $30,000 CARES grant, and the question is what to do with them. And so I put this in here from my perspective, but it's also the INF committee somewhat, as I think whatever we do with the CARES fund, we need to set 15K aside to cover next year's budget. Meaning, let's not commit all 30,000 right now. Let's withhold in the range of 15,000, and that covers the audit that we have to buy next year, which has been running about 10K for the 2-year audit, and another 5K, which we had to manipulate in case we're still doing tree mitigation. So this number could be 10K instead of 15K, but my thought is we should right up front now, let's not even put that on the table for discussion of spending right away. Let's set it aside.
I think especially in light of potentially not getting the 10K for last year and no 10K from Caltrans this year, having this reserve would be very important.
That's kind of the idea. I mean, we can always change our mind. It's not locked in concrete. It's just sort of a, do you guys agree we should set some aside, or do we want to, because down the road we have an funded project list where we could easily spend 30K without any problems.
Yeah, speaking of that, I guess whatever amount we leave for this fiscal year, we need to decide on a new budget or revised budget, I guess.
Yeah, it kind of runs in the deficit I see here that we did not have to cover this year is the audit cost, which is in the 10K range.
Right.
And we're, again, that number could be 10K instead of 30 if we feel the need is strong enough to spend the 20. But I thought I'd throw it out here as something to kind of tie us down a little bit so that we're not too generous with it.
I think we should, I like the 15K. And I guess, is there any other discussion? Otherwise, I'd like a motion that we do this.
Yeah, I'd like to
Fine, we
second
can always adjust it, so.
So
All
the
right.
motion is to reserve it, and with the idea that we can always adjust it with board vote.
Yeah, because it's a board decision. This just kind of makes it a little harder for us to spend it.
Okay, my motion to reserve the 15K, and I think Knut, you second it?
Yes.
Yeah, and,
Vote aye.
okay.
Yes, aye.
Aye.
That's aye. Okay. Okay. Next one is the situation with the flight school. They currently are putting a lot of time in their light sport aircraft, which run on automobile gas, basically, and they're having to pack in 5-gallon cans and fuel them that way. They're very active because, as I understand it, they're the only flight school on the western slope in El Dorado County, since Placerville is kind of wound down there, as far as I know. They're doing quite a volume, which is good for us and good for them, but having to shut 5-gallon jugs and having those sitting around is not ideal. So what they have done is on their own purchased a 250-gallon dispensing system, which is double walled, self-contained, has a pump, nozzle. It meets county environmental safety, yada yada. We've talked to all of them, and all it needs is from us is permission to put it where it is, which we have basically granted. The county is happy with it, and so we need to connect it to our power. so they can use it to fill stuff. They have a contract from a tanker to come in and fill it. So it'll pretty much wipe out all these 5-gallon cans of auto gas that they're having to deal with. And they will dispense from this station. It's a private system only. It's not available to the public. I think it's a good idea from the standpoint of safety and environment than using these portable containers. And so it's moving along. The question is, do we get compensation for it? We're trying to be fair, but we don't want to give away everything just because they're nice guys. So I think Kevin came up with a proposal of a flowage fee to compensate for, I guess you could say, the space that they're using, which is minimal, but the space and then the power connection and just having it here and coordinating whatever we got to coordinate is 10 cents a gallon. So the way it would work is every time they top it off, we get $25 out of them.
Has
So
that
that's
been,
the proposal.
has that been discussed with them?
Informally with Don and Dustin, yes. I think what will come behind it is a simple hold harmless. We've had them check with their insurance. There's no exclusions for the fuel there and the volume that we're talking about. And the reason, Terry, that this is so easy to place here where it is that we're underneath a threshold. If they went north of 250 gallons, then we'd have everybody in the regulatory area inside our vest. So they intentionally kept the tank small so that we could enjoy the, a little more latitude with where it's placed and operated. So yes, in fact, Don was happy to offer up the fuel flowage fee. And I came up with that number incidentally, just by looking at what a number of the other airports that are owned by counties and cities are charging their commercial FBO tenants on fuel sales. So we're kind of quite a bit higher than what most of the municipalities charge their FBO tenants. So we're doing okay. But just so everybody knows, Don's thought was, hey, why doesn't the airport purchase this and we'll buy the fuel at whatever the markup is, so that they didn't have to go and get it and just, it's a $5,000 asset. So I said, there's no way we're buying that right now, but we'd sure like to have first shot at it when the day comes. And, we've got 10 times as many light sport aircraft on the field. So that door is open, and he knows I'm interested in it. So that's the long story for that.
Kevin, this is Phil. Have we checked with our insurance company to make sure that it won't void or nullify any of the policy or things that we have like that? Just
Yes,
in case
affirmative.
there's an accident.
Yeah, and I think if anything, it's a little high personally, for the amount of electricity this thing's going to use is not 25 a month, but that would be the only point of discussion I would have. I think it's an easy way to do it, and I think Kevin, between him and the questions we've asked, has covered all of the bases. And given the size, he says it falls under the radar of the county environmental permit and all that stuff. And it's a nice unit. We took a look at it. It's the way to go. So I think it's just a matter of the principle of us recollecting something from them.
Yeah, we went in, cards face up on the deck. We were establishing pretty good relationships with air quality, hazardous materials, the planning department, and Gadzooks, the tax people. So what I had was the spec sheets for the product line, and sent those to each contact and asked them for their opinion, and got favorable responses across the board, including fire, by the way. So I think we're in pretty good shape there.
Sure seems to be a lot safer to do this than them hauling cans around.
I wish I could find one that did 100 low lead.
Yeah, how often, do you know how often they would have to refill the tank?
I'm estimating probably once a week or so. Maybe Knut, maybe you could offer some insight there, but depends on the weather.
Sorry, I'm not really supposed to participate.
Yeah. Guys, you're clues.
Yeah, Knut's recused because he makes money off of this, so.
That's
So,
just recitation fact, no opinion.
Hey, Kevin, this is Dave Becker. Can you hear me?
Like, yeah.
Yes,
One 2 cents worth here is that we ensure that the purchaser of the fuel is also the consumer of the fuel, that we don't introduce third-party sales
Right.
for sales tax and all the rest of it. So if somebody motors up who uses autogas in their aircraft, but they're not owned by the flight school, they need to be turned away.
yes, and the system has a lock on it that I believe they're gonna keep locked and maintain access to the key for it only.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, I understand your point though, David. Yeah, that's been the discussion and part of the hesitancy to get too enthusiastic with Don about the airport eventually, or the district rather, eventually taking it on is, yes, then we move into that other lane where we have to be paying all the taxes for retail type of sales.
So that have to be, I guess that's up to flight school placarded. It just says, for the flight school only.
Or they just keep it locked.
Yeah, it's locked.
Yeah.
It'll have the generic fuel warning placard and stuff on it, but I think it already has all that on it. But yeah, my only comment is that if they fill it once a week, then they're into us for 100 a month, and we're basically making money off of it. If we want to go closer to break even, I think it ought to be a little bit lower. But that's my only comment. Otherwise, I think it's a great system, and I think it's a good idea for them to pay the capital and everything else associated with getting it in there.
Yeah, it seems a little bit high. If they're willing to pay that, that's great for us. But I think we ought to be sensitive to the needs. The flight school business can cycle. And then maybe.
Yeah, well, they don't buy fuel, they don't pay us any money.
Right. Yeah, if they're comfortable with 10, is there a thought, Burrow, that says maybe we ought to reduce that somewhat?
Well, I was thinking if they're doing once a week, that's $100 a month, and I'm thinking it ought to be. I think that's more than compensatory for our cost. If we want to try to go towards a more what it costs us, so it's net neutral for us, it ought to be more like 5 cents a gallon, if that makes any sense. That's my only. I think if they're happy with this, I'll take it, but I'm just offering suggestion that we may not need to get that much from them for this.
Yeah, I look, it's concerned. I mean, it's of course use of electricity. Of course, it's the space they're using on it. But if we do this and they start to feel, hey, we're paying these guys 10 cents a gallon just to operate a pump, we want to maintain good relationship with them. But I guess going back to Kevin, I mean, what do you think? You've had the discussions with them.
Well, there wasn't a lot of dialogue around, what that number is. I agree that the draw on that little fish tank motor that moves the fuel up and over and into the plane is, non-existent compared to the air conditioner that's right next to it out there at the fuel shed. What I do take into consideration though is, despite their being our highest dollar tenant, they've really through the success of the flight school, they enjoy good access and to the assets at this end of the field. So as you look out, they're planes are on the ramp in front of the Streetman and Will Clarendon hangars here. They fill the parking lots, and they've got a stream of people using up my paper products in the bathroom, gosh darn it. So
Well, that's it then. I'm back up to 10 cents then.
okay. Yeah, so I don't think we're really shaking them down too hard, especially.
No, we're very generous, and we try to be as much reasonable as we can. So yeah, for toilet paper usage fee, I think that's
Yeah.
fine. So
I'd like to make a motion to approve this at 10 cents per gallon.
I would second it then on that.
Jeff agrees.
Vote aye.
And I agree. So,
Okay, and I do too, yeah.
Yep.
and note that Canute is abstained because he has a conflict.
So noted.
For the record. Okay. The next list is the INF committee's proposal for priority list of some unfunded and underfunded projects. So let me go through them kind of quickly, and we can, the idea is to try to drive what we're going to do the rest of the year, and then particularly next fiscal year's budget will be driven somewhat by this. So the first item is the audit coming up. We've been spending about 10K. It may go down based on the bids, but budgetary purposes, it's floating around 10. Currently, we did not put 5K in this year's budget because we don't have it. So we're gonna have to pony up 10K next year to cover the audit potentially, maybe less. Tree and obstruction mitigation, we did raise 5K, and I think it needs to stay there. So I think the minimum tree and obstruction, even if we get night ops back, it looks like about 15K to me. So the audit we have to do by legal things. Obstruction mitigation, we best keep up to it because he'll be back. And if he sees us going back to the old ways, I think they'll pull the trigger quicker than they ever than the last time as far as suppression. So we want to keep that going. The fuel vendor safety guy told us that the fuel hoses, they're date coded on the outside of the hose and they're at end of life next year. We don't have an actual quote, but it's in the 3 to 4K range just for the material. We can change them, but it's kind of like tires. Once they reach a certain age, irregardless of condition, they should be swapped out. They're actually still in pretty good condition, but we think that's a safety issue. The gate card reader at the Miraloma gate failed, the burned up card in the reader. It'll be about a 1K to get it fixed someday when they find the part. We have to have that gate functional for safety and security both. So that's an unplanned cost that we hadn't figured on even in this year's budget. We need to get a firm price, which we're in the process of, to repair the hangar door operators and cables and webs for these pivot doors. They've never been revisited. There's a few broken parts and stuff in them, and we just, what I'm interested in is getting a vendor to say, we've maintained them and there's no hazards, so that we don't have any issues. I'm not so concerned about reliability as I am safety if something should come loose on one of those things. We don't have a price, so we're gonna have to push to get that if we leave it in the priority. The fuel system, I think, is time to get serious about configuration, the plan, get some preliminary engineering pinned down so we can know what we're getting here. A round number is up to 10K. So what we'll do is put an RFQ together for the engineering and development of the details on this thing, a preliminary spec. It may not be as high as 10K, but that's a nice round number. It may be as low as 3 or 4K, but these things tend to rise up, especially if we get drawings and stuff developed. So Canute and I are working to put an RFQ together, which we will review as soon as it's ready by the next board meeting, probably, to go over the details. And so we're saying we need to set aside some money to get this thing going. Meet minimum exempt salary. We talked about that earlier. It's about 4K, 4.5, to get enough in there for returning it to exempt. The tie down hooks and chains need to be replaced and upgraded. We have the specs. We just need to get a count and a price. I don't think this will be more than a few thousand, but we got to check. The fuel point of sale or credit card system is obsolete, doesn't meet requirements. The best deal we found for an upgrade is 12K so far. And then the constant need for a real airport vehicle available to go off site for all of this hauling of stuff back and forth and other things. And the suggestion there is to do like we did for the mowing crew, is initiate a team and assess the real need. And then it's probably going to be 6 to 10K for something like a little pickup or something, if that's what they end up actually needing. So the question is to bring the board up to speed. If the board in principle agrees, or there's further discussion items that are missing, this will become the tree that'll drive a lot of next year's budget decisions, and maybe the near-term CARES fund balance being applied to some of those. So trying to get the juices started to think about this stuff.
Well, it's also important to note that what we're doing is we want to prioritize these or get the principles here, but each one, if it comes to expenditures, it would have to be approved by the board, or unless they fall below a certain threshold.
Yeah, what this is trying to bring attention to the INF committee's identification of items that are not funded at all or underfunded, leading into what we've got to do next year for sure, and be able to carry this forward. So.
But just to review it in terms of a schedule, the fuel hoses, you say they're at end of life, or they'll be approaching their
I think 10 years they time out, and they'll be 10 years old at the beginning of next year.
I think specifically Q3 of this year is when they have been 10
Yeah,
years.
so they're there now, basically. Yeah.
They're soon. Does our insurance require anybody know that the hoses be replaced? I mean, if they're in good condition, if we do that, we have this liability if we exceed, the TBO kind of thing.
It seems to be pointed out by Epic Safety Inspector every time, so maybe they have a requirement that we get it done. I don't know what they would do about it if we don't know.
Yeah, I don't know about these hoses. Well, they can just fail, but
Yeah. Well, I think, yeah, we can pull a string and verify what really is there, what's the impact,
yeah, it's one thing if we're required to do it, but it goes as we can, keep an eye on them. But of course, if we break a hose and gas spills all over this, that's a bad day.
Yeah.
I think a number of those, Terry, are actually what the vendor safety officer, what their criteria are for a customer. So they come out and inspect, and if your fuel farm is so ugly that it's a risk to them, they won't deliver, they won't sell you gas. So I don't know if the hoses are going to put us in jeopardy that quickly, but we're certainly at Epic's preferred change out date, and they are time stamped. So that's kind of the in your face is the cheese is starting to go bad on us.
Right. The hanger repair, sorry, I may miss it. Is that, have we got any feedback from vendors, or is that that's pending on what that could cost? Or
Well, we had an initial inspection that identified areas that need to be fixed. We just don't have the price nailed down. There's also the question of the interlock between the two hangars so the doors don't clash. And we need to run this to the ground as far as getting a price.
We have an initial one that's up in the 8K range, but it has some activities in there I don't think we really need to do. So I need to go back to them and have recast it. But the big one that I was interested in them taking on, because I think it takes a little diagnostic effort and working, is to, as Burl just pointed out, is to get that interlock put back. Somebody snipped the cable and intentionally did a bypass on it. So the interlock is making sure the two people opening the doors at the same time have eye contact with each other.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with the orders. It's discussed here, and we've just seen that the tie down stuff shouldn't be terribly expensive. That's order out of the catalog and just go do it.
Yeah,
As long as
exactly.
those anchors, if we're comfortable with those anchors, I agree that we can get out there and do that.
Yes, that's a good point. I'm assuming the anchors are fine. And the anchors would have to be addressed when we redo someday, hopefully, to redo the tie down pavement.
Mhm.
I agree with the order. I think it's a good one, having also been to the IF&C, the Infrastructure Finance Committee discuss, I think it makes sense.
All right, we'll stick with this then and move forward with it. It's informational and to elicit discussion, and also to see if we missed anything that people are aware of that we're not needing to deal with. So, okay. Now the fun stuff begins. As everyone knows, Measure P failed. We still have several major financial issues. One is the ongoing operations requirements of the airport. The other is the maintenance and repairs of the streets. And the third is likely to be the capital cost of the fuel system change out. Those are the three biggies to consider. I think based on what I'm considering doing, and the INF is kind of working that way, is the ballot measure failed. One of the reasons that we hear is it was too much, asking for too much. The other thing that I think we did strategically that was not well received and was used against us is we suggested improvements and funding for such improvements. So we're in the beginning phases of revisiting the required airport amount with the idea of this is what it's going to take to survive. No improvements, no upgrades unless they're legally required, and so that will lower that number. Streets, whatever we do for streets is never going to be sufficient to catch up with the deficiencies. So I think what we talked about earlier about we really need a new street condition assessment and now gutter assessment to see really where we stand and what we do forward. Because I think if you just look at gutters and the idea of a slurry seal, we're probably in the 1.5 million range to replace and fix all the gutters and slurry seal. No way is the feedback I get that anybody's going to support that. So I think we need to figure out what we're going to do or not. Let it fail and go for a bond. I don't know. So it's a discussion. So that's the idea. And then the third is the fuel system, and we have numbers all over the map on that. So once we get some seed money and an RFQ, I think, and an actual configuration that we believe will work out there, then we can pin down that price. But it's still going to be, 100 to 300,000 ish. I don't know. It's not something we're going to pick up without some sort of additional income. So given that situation, the INF committee went through the entire, everywhere they could think of as a way to raise money. And each of these takes a significant amount of effort to finalize and put together. And we wanted to know, does the board, which of these the board thinks they want to support and which ones they think want to move forward on, or no chance, let's not do that, and then we'll put our efforts to get the other ones done. So the idea is not necessarily debate the specifics of each one. I will kind of give you an outline of what it's going to take to do. And then the idea is for the board to give us some guidance on which ones do you want to pursue or not. So hopefully we can get through these, but it does also open your eyes up to what might be the potential ways to assess fees or raise money. So the first one is, do we want to go and do another ballot measure? So that's the question there. Phil is a proponent of a nominal increase, basically 25 with double awarding now. My suggestion is we identify the specific and actual need and generate a number. And I don't know where it's going to come, how close to 25 or not it's going to come. But I think instead of kind of just picking a number, we ought to have some reason for it and explain it that way. But I think the number will be less than we had originally envisioned, because I think we need to look upon it as a survival number, not to enhance anything out there. So the question for the board is, do they have the heart? Do they feel there's any merit? Is it worth proceeding with a ballot measure? Ballot measure takes a lot of time. It doesn't take a lot of money, because putting the ballot on a regular election and the processing of that doesn't cost us anything. It just takes time to develop it. But
I'm not really, I mean, we're gonna look at the other options you have listed down below, but I'm kind of ballot burned out. That was a lot of time. You know, we went through a lot of budgets, a lot of effort, and kind of got down to at least a kind of a survival kind of ish number. And given the history, I'm not in favor of this. I think the focus of the board should be on the other options down below for the activity.
I agree with Terry, but I also think that a new ballot measure might, from a strategic standpoint, be something we can do at the same time. And I'll give you an example. I think, with all due respect, Phil, I think $25 a month is like a drop in the bucket. I mean, we did the white paper analysis last year, and I think we were looking just to make like normal maintenance of the roads, and the airport was somewhere slightly north of $200 a month. And I mean, to be quite honest, I think the residents of the air park have been getting a free ride for 25 years, and it's time to pay the piper. I mean, we're literally going to start running this place into the ground if we don't start taking care of it. If I think more than likely, if we just go with strictly a ballot measure, it's going to get gunned down. If we put any kind of reasonable amount in there of what we actually need, it's going to get shot down. Although that is the only tax deductible option we have, from a taxpayer, that's the way to go. But we need the dollar amounts up high enough where it's realistic to pursue. Otherwise, we're going to be going to the well every year for another $25 or $50, and that just wears out its welcome fairly quickly. Now, going in option B here, where we have a fee assessed by a board vote, I think that's maybe the way it's going to have to go. However, if we start, settling on a number that's realistic, and I'm just going to toss out $150 or $200, whatever you want, if the board's going to assess that, we can start. I mean, there's probably going to be some public notifications required for that. And if that's the case, you may start being able to talk people into that tax deductible option as well. So it may be strategic to do them both simultaneously, then rescind one of them. That's my 2 cents worth.
Okay. The thing is that the way I see this is let's run through the options real quick,
Sure.
and then we can see. So the next one is pursue board ability to assess fees directly by board vote. We need some legal input and assistance, which will cost us something, to see if we can do this in order to pick up what we need to do. So we need to write up a summary of what this fee looks like and what it's for, and then hire probably Dave at some dollars to give us a legal review for that before we pursue it. I think we have a lot of power here. Where it gets tricky is when you try to assess it per property, and that has to be carefully thought through. I think the impact and viability of increasing fuel prices, and I believe increased fuel prices, I think is, to me, I'm opposed to. I think we charge a reasonable average amount and we net a fair value for that. And I don't think the amount we could increase them is going to get us very far. Again, it's a sensitive thing to do. I think we're on top of that. I don't think we're defending being current. Hangar tie down rates, we need to review those because we're kind of not charging evenly. If you look at it per square footage, it's not going to generate a lot of money, but I think the thing needs to be cleaned up and unified. But we're not going to be able to increase fuel prices and hangar and tie down rents to solve our problem, but I think there's incremental things that'll go on here anyway. This one we need, pursue aircraft hangar fee for private commercial hangar. This is for the private properties on the airport that currently only pay a single fee per property, but there are multiple aircraft using that property. Again, we need to draft something and get a legal determination to proceed, but the idea is we would pick up the 13 T hangars right now. That one property only pays the same as a single property, even though there's 13 airplanes on there. So I think there needs to be a way to just clean that up. But again, it won't be enough revenue, I don't think, realistically, to make a difference, but it kind of moves us forward a little bit. Special district assessment. There's a process, and this is the way these work. Is you determine what you want the assessment to be for. We do need a legal determination if we can use it for maintenance. There's some implications we can, otherwise it goes only for capital type activities. But the way special districts work is you set up a public meeting. If it's not voted down in the public meeting, you develop a ballot internally. It doesn't go through the county at all. It becomes one vote per property, simple majority carries the special assessment. That's how the bonds for the streets got passed. And it's all done internally. So it's basically you'd hire a legal firm to run the program and get your special assessment done towards a capital project. This is kind of a lighter version of the ballot measure system. The thing I don't know about this one that we would have to ask and get a legal determination is if we can use it for operating funds ongoing. It kind of says yes, but it kind of says no, and we don't know for sure. But it definitely would work for a fuel system or capital project that has a fixed amount and an endpoint. We might as well understand the current loans and bond rates and what we qualify for. So that's a research project. Resident was interested in raising money as an independent nonprofit. They can do that. The board can't do it. If they want to create an additional separate nonprofit, they can hire someone to do it. It takes 3 or 4 months, a lot of hoops to jump through with the IRS, et cetera, but that's a possibility if a resident wants to carry the ball and generate that documents to go with it. Or FOCA could be approached to divide FOCA where there's a FOCA social part and a FOCA airport fundraising street part. That could be done legally under the 501c3. So I think this one's open if anybody, any resident other than a board member wants to put this together. That's what it's going to take. I think we should also get a wording and see if there's any issues with how the district would accept, say, direct donations or gifts. And we should solicit people for legacy or estate donations. If they put, you know, in their will, 1% goes to Cameron Park Airport District or something, they would be allowed to do that and encouraged to do that. So again, what we have here is several things that need legal input before we can really jump in. And I'm kind of like everybody else. I think if we hang our hat on a ballot measure, we're going to fail, or the amount is going to be trivial, which is, I guess, in principle makes everybody feel good, but it you know, we need to consider that it needs to be based on need, not what we think would pass. So.
I think Burl, as you mentioned, we got that the exercise to go through and it's really going through what we did before and revalidate the numbers, the survival mode. That's a value to do that.
Yeah, we need to do that in any event because we got to know what fee we're going to ask for what,
Right.
So, and we're almost there. It's not that hard to do what we're doing because it doesn't involve the estimates for any of the upgrades and stuff because we're not doing them,
Right, and that's pretty much what we had in the ballot.
Yeah, and I don't know what that number is yet. And then we have to then we can determine whether to lump in a cost to pay for the fuel system in that number, or leave it out, or do some other stuff. So it's maybe a moot point, I guess, to try to drop any of these at this point. I think, the thing we have to do is get these legal determinations, and that we have to get an estimate from them and then request that funding maybe next meeting. Maybe that's the next step.
I see maybe what we should decide in this meeting is, do we want to fund legal cost for researching the other ones? I'm kind of with Jeff that we should consider the ballot measure again for the reasons stated and maybe see what amount we could be successful with. And I agree that we get so I would be in favor of another ballot measure. On the other hand, I don't think we can wait for the next election, which I think, isn't that next year, 22?
June, I think June, but
June,
we have to
okay.
get in it early. So, yeah.
Well, then we might be too late, right? We need a 6-month notification of.
One bit of information I'd like to kind of get out there just for everyone to ponder is I've been here at the air park about 18 years. I think this is the 4th or 5th attempt to raise that fee. And they've always went with a higher amount. And it's failed every time. If we went with a lesser amount over the past 15 years that probably would have passed, we'd currently have about $500,000 in the bank with that $300 increase. So if you take $37,000, it's about what we're getting now, and multiply that by 15, I think you're going to come up with just quick rudimentary mathematics. That's $500,000, and $500,000 is a pretty substantial amount that we've missed out on by trying to go for the big gusto money when it's obviously failed multitude of times.
Wait, you lost me on the $500,000. Where did that come
Well,
from?
you take, if you got 37,000 a year,
Yeah.
times 15, I think that comes up to $500,000.
Oh, that's what you meant.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, we've decided to go for a higher amount and got nothing over the last 15 years. And so to do that again, to go for an exorbitant or a higher amount may not be productive for anyone.
Oh, I agree. Yeah. But I think, yeah.
And I've also discussed this with the AOPA. And their feeling is that it would be a good idea because some of the past practices here with the district where the monies have been used inappropriately. That if we got confidence in the way the board would handle those monies, that would be a good way for, as a starting point. And then if all the residents saw that the money was being used in a way that was appropriate, then we could come back and go for another project. And that was as late as of today. I spoke with Melissa.
Yeah, that's the gist I got from their INF inputs, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think what we should probably do is table all of these things with the kind of, we need to go develop the number based on the need and then see where that lands. And then when the discussion comes back to whether we go with that number or go with some lesser number or not, that'll be a discussion for that time. And then I think we need to get the determinations on these legal questions roughed out and then get an from, Dave said he could, but we need to pay him. So we need to put together a proposal for him to give us an estimate. We can look at that next meeting. Does that make sense to move forward on this? In the meantime, the board is aware of some of the possibilities, and INF will continue to try to develop the actual numbers and see what that looks like. Does that make sense?
Sounds good.
Does, thank you.
Yeah, so we're not going to kill any of these tonight, but you know, so I'm trying to get it to where it was your awareness of the possibilities that we're aware of, and if anybody comes up with a better idea or another one. But personally, I would really love to empower the board to assess the fees, and if people don't like it, they can move or kick the board off the next election. And the board still has to justify whatever they do in a public meeting, a public discussion, so we can't just get nuts about this. But, and I understand what Phil's saying, and I can see that also. And I thought we had addressed all of those issues many, many times over all the stuff we did, but it didn't take. So I'm kind of balloted out also as far as trying to sell people on the ballot. So, but I don't think we should exclude it at this point. I think we should see where the numbers fall, have that discussion, and see where it goes. You know.
Sounds good.
And some of the higher level things that I didn't mention is any fees we assess have to be evenly distributed. We don't want to charge the airplane guys a higher fee because they got an airplane, and the non-airplane guys a lesser fee. It has to be equivalent per property in the sense of whatever base fee we come up with. There may be some enhancements on people that have 13 airplanes on their property or something like that. You know, that's in the noise. So that's my thought. Anything else you guys want to do? You want to kill any of these, or you want to just kind of table the approvals, and we'll develop a legal outline so that Dave can give us a price and go from there.
No, I think we do as I say, we table these as you suggested, and let's take a look at the numbers for the estimates to do the legal work.
All right, and I will gin up the legal proposal for review next board meeting. And then if we agree that that's what we're going to ask him to do, then we can get a number out of him quickly and go from there.
What about, should we look into getting the schedule for the next election if we don't want to hold our own, so we can?
Yeah,
meet
we
with
should,
it?
if we're still considering a ballot measure, so we need to understand the schedule commitment.
Yeah, I can look at that.
I believe that for $300, the county will run a ballot for us pretty much anytime we want.
Yeah.
Whereas it isn't, we wouldn't run concurrently with another election. We can ask
We can get
whatever we
a
want.
price for a special election also as part of our, when you talk to the county, Canute, ask them for the price of a special election for us.
Yeah.
All right, I think that covers it. Mostly good news. I think we're close to being out of the woods on night ops. And the CARES fund is here. We just got to be careful how we spend it. So good effort. Welcome to the new board, everybody. And is there anything else for tonight?
I just want to thank for all the others attending the meeting.
And
Yeah.
thank you, new board members, for stemming up and volunteering as you have.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, doke. Well, I'm gonna call it adjourn then at 8:54. Thank you all. Good input.
Good job again, Burl.
Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Burrow.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Brill, and congratulations.